Hello and welcome to Understanding Narcissists. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I want to talk about a topic that I don't get a lot, but it's one of those things that I want to talk about or I think is really significant, but may not come to me in the form of a question. There's a lot of things that you ask me that you want to know that I do my best to answer. And then there's another side of things that I think are really important to talk about, but may not be something that is easily surfaced or comes into mind, but explains a lot of things that you're wondering about. And one of those things is rage and why narcissists seem to be so rageful. First of all, I'd like to define rage because I was thinking about this video a few minutes ago, realizing I was gonna make this and talk about this, and I thought I'm not sure I know what rage is per se, except an extreme form of anger. Now, the reason I want to distinguish it from anger is that I see anger as a response, a defense mechanism to some kind of perceived threat or aggression. And so you get angry or aggressive as a result. It's kind of the emotional side to when an animal is cornered and vulnerable and perceives a threat and behaves aggressively. I feel like we become angry. Now, I don't want to define anger just through that explanation, through that mechanism, because it may not be sufficient. And that's not really what I'm trying to put across. I'm trying to put across the necessary foundation to explain why narcissists seem so angry or just rageful. And in that way, I think rage is maybe it's more easy to define and describe, where I just see it as a sort of an acting out of malice, implementing their hate. So the action side of all the bad feelings they feel towards you, towards others, towards whomever that we may not even know. They seem to remain faceless oftentimes. It is a display of those emotions. It is a release of them in some way, and some attempt at a legitimate form of release for expressing those emotions that they seem to lack so much. And that's how I want to kind of get into this video. And it's not the origins of why they're so rageful, if we can agree on that, doesn't seem to be that big of a mystery. They're put in a very dysfunctional, emotionally traumatic environment that they do not have an outlet to cope with. And so thereby it becomes sort of the coping mechanism. It's sort of like if something's bothering you and stressing you to a great degree, if you're able to talk about it, communicate it, get feedback, do other things that release a lot of that. I don't want to say negative energy because I don't want to take this down a spiritual path, but that experience, it alleviates that long term, maybe getting you on track to something more functional. If that is not able to happen, it's sort of like you internalize it and it destroys your mind. You take on a dysfunctional adaptation, especially at the young age that they're experiencing this, the narcissists, the formative age that they're being abused and receiving this negative feedback. It changes them forever. And one of those things, if you're just looking at it in the simplest case, is that they're in an environment where there's a lot of animosity, there's a lot of aggression, but you're not supposed to show it. And it's not something that is supposed to be acknowledged and let out, but it does have to come out some way, and it has to be acted upon, and that's how they do it. With whatever's going on inside, all the censorship, all of the complete lack of communication and expression is going to lead to some amount of this emotional energy that remains bottled up. And while that is sort of a visual and somewhat metaphorical explanation, I do think it suffices in giving you an idea of why they're like that, even if it's not 100% accurate, however you interpret it, that explanation. Narcissists are full of rage. They are very pent up. They have a lot of energy that needs to come out. That's not a bad thing when it's positive, the energy itself, but it's wholly negative. And why is that? Why is it that they cannot seem to be able to keep certain things in check? I've always noticed something that seems to be just one of the many contradictions of narcissists, but a major contradiction is how together and organized and self-controlled they're supposed to be. I've talked about that before. It's usually an essential ingredient, part of the illusion. How they view themselves, how they get others to view themselves, etc. It's always that they're together and that they are competent. And in particular, that they're in control of their emotions. I think I covered in a video a long time ago that the exact opposite is true. They are not in control of their emotions at all. There are some regulatory mechanisms, however. And I can go into those, but I do want to stay on the topic of when those mechanisms break, when that levee breaks, and they become rageful. And I don't even want to say that they become enraged, because they're always enraged. I think they were enraged a long time ago, and they're just enraged on a daily basis. It looks like you did something and they've become enraged and that did it, and they're going to play off of that. Circumstances sort of coalesce in a way that they don't have another opportunity but to lose it. Now, what can happen during these bursts can vary greatly from narcissist to narcissist, but there's generally a pattern. And I would say it probably is going to adhere to what I call the cycle of abuse. I did a video on it earlier, and it basically covered how it's all a part of this essential process where they can't keep it going themselves. How whatever stage they're in, of how they're kind of projecting themselves, how they're behaving, is unsustainable. And so there are these calms, and then I guess I want to say lapses, where they fall back into really aggressive behavior. Now, that kind of thing is pretty typical of abusive people and dysfunctional people. Narcissists follow their own pattern, but it is still reminiscent of the entire abuse cycle, which I think I want to go into in future videos. But that rage is an essential ingredient, as I said before. Is it just rage that drives them? I'm not sure if that's all they experience. That seems to be what they express in their truest form when you get down to it. I think they're scared children. They're vulnerable children. But the response is that they are rageful because of it. And the reason they're in that position is because somebody did not take care of them. And they're always in that position emotionally. They always feel that way. That's why even when they're adults, even when they're perfectly capable or competent, they can't act like it. They can't live that way, at least not for any considerable period of time. It's not going to happen. And that's an eerie thing, because the small, I guess, time scale that they go through, and what I mean by that is it's not a thing that comes around every once in a while. It's very frequent. It's a disorder, and so it's always going on. It's not that there's some flexibility in how things play out. It's that you're always in the cycles. They don't vary. There can be different reasons, superficial reasons and explanations on their part mostly as to what's going on, the things they're trying to make you believe of what's wrong. But there's always an excuse for this rage. And this rage throughout all the cycles is present. I didn't mean to suggest earlier that just when they explode or just fume at you, where it's explicit anger, aggressive body language, it's always there, even when it's passive. They're always passively aggressive, and I've talked about that before, but I'm talking about just the raw animosity, the raw hatred they have for you, for other people, and the grand question as to why that is. It baffles me to an extent. It's one of those things where it's not a complete mystery. You feel like one half you know, and the other half you don't, and the half you know is not really sufficient in explaining the rest of it. Because, like I said, you can go into their past, learn about their relationship with their parents, and you'll learn just a eensy bit of how dysfunctional that was most of the time. You never look back and go, what happened? It's usually not a mystery. There's usually a family illusion to cover it all up and maintain the integrity of that illusion within the family that they grew up in. But in my experience, it's usually not terribly, terribly difficult to see that there's something wrong. How do you explain how that rage is so apparently kept in check? How is it controlled? How is it, well at the same time being totally unacknowledged? They're not going to talk about it. There's a number of things they'll never talk about, and one is they're never really angry. There are instances where they can say they're angry, but it has nothing to do with the source of that anger. So if there's some kind of trigger, some kind of legitimate outlet, what they try to hold on to, something you did, usually very minor, that grates on them, suddenly they explode out of nowhere. And again, I don't want to suggest that it's throwing things around. It's the emotional weight of it. It's the abusive moment where they're really trying to hurt you. It's impossible for me to describe completely accurately, but when you experience it, because it's such a personal experience, such a personal, emotional, really kind of dysfunctional, intimate experience, that you only know it when you've gone through it. But once you've gone through it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And then that question arises, which is, what is going on? Where did that come from? And the simplest answer might be, well, they're just simply angry at the abusive parent for abusing them and not being able to find any relief from that. Or, and I prefer this explanation, is actually there's an abusive parent that they're terrified of and that hurt them, and they're angry at the other parent, the enabler, for not protecting them. That's usually how I see it unfolding. There's not a lot of direct fury directed at their abuser. If you are in the fortunate situation or unfortunate situation to know who their abuser is, it's usually the enabler who gets all the brunt of the negativity and the attribution of all the problems. It's the enablers who are all behind it, not the abusers. And that's at the heart of the dysfunctional relationship, is irresponsibility and unaccountability. How does that rage account for how they live their lives? This very primitive, infantile rage. A lot of their emotions are infantile, but it really borders on, is based on that absolute reviling and hatred of someone. I'm not sure who, but something's going on, and it's always personalized in that response to the danger, to the threat that they're always having to deal with. Because notice that the very idea, the very behavior of being aggressive, how they're going out and dominating everything, everywhere, or trying to maintain some kind of control over it. It's the other side of that coin. It's inherently vulnerable. I believe they do that because they're vulnerable, not because they're aggressive. I think the aggression is an expression of the vulnerability, or rather a response of it. I don't think they would do that if they weren't so insecure and so vulnerable all of the time. And you can see how that rage, that conflict sustains them, because they're never going to get to the broken state where they feel completely vulnerable. They don't seem to be able to acknowledge that. And so the rage in that way is a mechanism for them to deny it, you see. And that rage is what powers that entire abuse cycle. There's always this battle with their insecurity, and the rage is able to sort of envelop that and protect them from it. And I guess that's what I'm really trying to get at in this video, is that fundamental force that drives them, that keeps one foot in front of the other for them, keeps them marching forward. It's very primitive. I think we all have that within us, but maybe we're able to make some decisions aside from just that. And they can't. They're completely at the mercy of this. And that's where I want to get some kind of more concrete description of what's going on than just, oh, it's a personality disorder. Because if I just say it's a personality disorder, then I start laying out all the patterns of the disorder as it pertains to the definition of other disorders. And of course, they have similarities with other mental disorders, but narcissism has some very real differences and variations, and those have to be pointed out in a specific form in order for it to all make sense. Anyway, I hope I didn't ramble on too long. I hope you like this video. Like it if you do. Share it with somebody you think might benefit from it. Comment in the comment section below on what you think about narcissists and rage and your experiences with narcissistic rage. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next video. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye.